All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back for another deep dive with us. You guys have been following the Russia-Ukraine war pretty closely, right? And there was there was that really crazy event in Moscow recently, the killing of that top Russian general, remember? We've
Mm.
got a whole bunch of articles about it, and even some pretty heated discussions from Reddit. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're going to dive into all that today. This isn't just about one death, though. It's sparking all these huge discussions about international relations, about, what's even acceptable in war these days, and even how it ties back to U.S. politics.
Yeah, it really feels like every action, almost every single action at this point has the potential to just ripple outwards. It affects not just Russia and Ukraine, but like the entire world.
Exactly. It's a huge deal. So to really get into all the details of this, we're going to be looking at a few different sources today. We've got some excerpts from Ukrainska Pravda. That's a Ukrainian news outlet, right? And then we've got an article from the Kyiv Independent. And to see what regular people are saying, we're also going to look at a Reddit discussion. From War World News. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what happened, how different groups are interpreting it, and why it matters so much.
It's a chance to,
Yeah.
to really go beyond just the headlines and grasp the nuances of everything that's happening.
Okay, so let's start. Let's just break down the event itself, what actually happened. So December 17th, Russian Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, he was the head of their radiation, chemical, and biological protection troops. He was killed in Moscow, along with his assistant. And the reports are saying it was a bomb attached to a scooter. Now, no one has officially confirmed who was behind it yet, but a Ukrainian security service source is telling Ukrainska Pravda that it was a special operation carried out by the SBU, Ukraine's security service.
Right, and this is where understanding, really understanding who General Kirillov was, becomes so crucial. The Kyiv Independent article is straight up call him a war criminal, and they're alleging that he ordered the use of chemical weapons against Ukrainian troops. So, I mean, this framing totally colors how people are reacting to his death.
Yeah, absolutely. It adds a whole other layer of complexity to this, doesn't it? Is it even considered an assassination if the target is accused of war crimes? It makes you really think about how we define justice, especially during a conflict as brutal as this one.
You've hit on, you've hit on a key point there, the line between what's a legitimate military target and what constitutes an extrajudicial killing, a killing that's outside of the legal process. That line is often really blurry, especially during wartime.
Yeah, and it gets even more complicated when you bring in the international reactions, too. The U.S., for example, they said they weren't even informed about the assassination, and they don't support it. What do you think about that? Is that just them trying to distance themselves?
I mean, there's definitely historical precedence for this, for governments to make statements like that, where they very carefully toe the line between, supporting their allies and condoning these potentially controversial actions. We have to remember the U.S. has given a ton of military and financial support to Ukraine.
Right.
But they also have to think about what would happen globally if they're seen as directly involved in this, in an assassination on Russian soil.
Yeah, the repercussions. And then you've got, this is where Keith Kellogg comes in. He's President-elect Trump's pick for the Ukraine-Russia peace envoy, right? And he goes on Fox News and just flat out criticizes the assassination. He says that it might even be a violation of the rules of war. Both the Kyiv Independent and Ukrainska Pravda quoted him saying this: "When you kill flag officers, general officers, admirals, or generals in their hometown, quote, you kind of extended the rules of war. And I don't think that's very smart to do it."
Wow.
Strong words, right?
Yeah, that statement, Kellogg's statement, just throws a huge wrench into everything.
Yeah.
I mean, here he is. He's supposed to be the one leading peace negotiations.
Yeah.
And he's publicly taking a stance. That could easily be seen as siding with Russia. Makes you wonder, how's that going to affect his ability to be a neutral mediator?
That's a great point. It's almost like he's undermining his own mission before it even begins.
Yeah, it really raises questions about his approach and, potentially, the direction of the incoming administration's foreign policy.
Okay, and speaking of different perspectives, we can't ignore what happened on Reddit. This whole thing ignited this firestorm on Reddit, the world news thread. Oh my gosh, it is just a wild mix of opinions. Some users are fiercely debating whether targeting generals is even any different, ethically or strategically, from targeting regular soldiers.
This is a debate. I mean, this debate has been raging for centuries.
Yeah.
Some argue that, leaders have a greater responsibility for the consequences of war. So that makes them. But then others maintain that all soldiers, it doesn't matter their rank,
Right.
They should be protected under the laws of war.
Yeah, tough question. There's no easy answers for that one, and some Reddit users are saying that this assassination was completely justified because of all the war crimes that Russia has been accused of. But then, of course, there's the other side. Who's worried about escalation?
Yeah, and it's a legitimate concern, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every action in a conflict like this has the potential to spark retaliation and even further violence, which is why this idea of extending the rules of war, like Kellogg said, that's so unsettling to a lot of people.
Right, right. And then on top of all that, you've got all these comments about Trump's stance and what this means for the U.S.-Russia relationship. It's like this one event has become this like focal point for all the existing tensions, all the anxieties surrounding this war and global politics in general.
It is. It is fascinating how this specific event has tapped into so many different layers of this debate. The ethics of warfare, the complexities of international relations, and even, the looming shadow of U.S. domestic politics. It's a real-world example of how something that seems like an isolated incident can have these far-reaching consequences.
It really can. This assassination has just thrown a massive wrench into everything, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has.
And we were talking about Kellogg,
right,
and his potential role as this peace envoy. But is he even remotely equipped to handle this now?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
How do you negotiate peace when you've already managed to alienate one of the parties? A lot of people are saying that.
Right.
By him publicly criticizing the assassination, he's basically compromised his neutrality already.
Yeah, like right out of the gate. It can't exactly inspire confidence in the Ukrainians, right?
No, definitely not.
If he's already seemingly taking sides here, how could they possibly trust him to represent their interests fairly? In any kind of peace talks.
It definitely adds a layer of skepticism for sure.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how he handles this moving forward.
Yeah.
Will he try to walk back his comments? Or is he going to double down?
Right, right. And those Reddit comments, some people were saying that this might mean peace talks are off the table completely now.
Yeah.
Like if Ukraine feels like it has to resort to these kinds of tactics, maybe they've given up on diplomacy altogether.
It's a chilling thought.
It is.
But it's not. I mean, it's not entirely implausible.
Right.
This assassination could be interpreted as a sign of desperation.
Yeah.
Like a signal that, that Ukraine feels like they're backed into a corner and they don't see any other way to achieve their goals.
It's a grim reminder of how easily things can escalate and spiral out of control, especially when both sides feel like they have nothing left to lose.
Absolutely. The stakes they're undeniably high. And it's important to remember that the repercussions, they extend far beyond just Ukraine and Russia.
Okay, so we talked about Kellogg and the impact on peace talks. But what about the U.S. government's response to the assassination itself? They said that they weren't notified and they don't support it. What are we supposed to make of that?
It's a very carefully worded statement.
Yeah, it is.
It leaves a lot open to interpretation.
Right.
On one hand, it seems like, maybe a way for them to maintain some distance so they're not directly implicated in something that a lot of people see as controversial.
So they're basically saying, yeah, we're helping you out, Ukraine, but we don't condone this.
It's possible, yeah. The U.S. has a pretty long history of involvement in, covert operations, intelligence sharing.
Right.
So it's not, it's not inconceivable that they had some awareness of what was going on.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that the U.S. might have known about this assassination, but they're just choosing to play dumb?
It's impossible to say for sure without seeing, all the classified information.
Right.
But it's definitely, worth considering. Governments don't always operate with full transparency, especially when it comes to, national security.
Yeah, that's true. And all those comments on Reddit about the U.S. condemning this. But they have their own history of targeted killings, right?
That's an important point to acknowledge.
Yeah.
The U.S. has been criticized a lot for their use of drone strikes and other tactics that have ended up, killing civilians, even in countries where they weren't actively engaged in traditional warfare.
It's that whole do as I say, not as I do thing.
Exactly.
Which never looks good on the world stage.
It really undermines the moral authority of any country to condemn someone else's actions when they've been doing the same things themselves.
Right, right. It feels like with all of this, everyone's playing this high-stakes game of chess. but no one's really sure what the rules are anymore.
Yeah.
And with Trump back in the White House, it feels like the board just got tilted even further.
Yeah. The impact of Trump's return on this conflict can't be overstated.
Right.
I mean, all of his past rhetoric, all his actions, especially his, admiration for Putin and his skepticism of NATO.
Yeah.
It's created this sense of unease and unpredictability globally.
His whole America First policy and his willingness to, cozy up to authoritarian leaders, it's ruffled a few feathers.
To say the least.
To say the least.
It
remains to be seen how his administration is going to handle this conflict. With Kellogg as the peace envoy, it might hint that they're moving towards a more conciliatory approach with Russia, but with Trump, it's always hard to say what he's going to do next.
Yeah, he's not exactly known for consistency or, sticking to traditional diplomatic norms.
It's like he's playing poker with, the world's stability.
He really is.
We're all just waiting to see what hand he'll play.
The stakes are incredibly high.
They are.
This assassination, it hasn't just intensified the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It's also exposed these cracks and contradictions in the international order.
Yeah.
It's forcing us to re-examine the very foundations of global security.
So we've got this escalating conflict, this new U.S. administration with a, questionable track record, and then the global community is struggling to figure out what even are the rules of engagement in the 21st century.
Yeah.
It's enough to make your head spin.
It's a tangled web, that's for sure.
It is.
But that's why it's so important to engage with these issues,
right?
To seek out different perspectives and to really grapple with, all the difficult questions they raise.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do here, right?
Exactly.
To give you the tools and the information so you can form your own opinions.
It's not about, finding easy answers or simple solutions, because honestly, there aren't any. Not in a situation like this.
Right.
It's about encouraging critical thinking.
Yeah.
Fostering informed debate and empowering people to engage with the complexities of the world.
Exactly. As we've been talking about all of this, I keep thinking about Kellogg's argument about the assassination, maybe violating the rules of war. It's easy to just say, oh, well, war is brutal, so anything goes. But isn't there? Shouldn't there be some kind of line, even in all the chaos?
It's a question that's been around forever. I mean, war is all about violence and destruction. But throughout history, we've at least tried to impose some order.
Right.
Some boundaries to prevent it from becoming completely barbaric.
Right, and we have things like the Geneva Conventions that lay out rules for how wars are fought and how prisoners should be treated.
Yeah.
But those rules, they were written for a different time, right?
That's exactly the problem.
Yeah.
The world has changed so much.
Right.
Since those conventions were first written.
Yeah.
We're dealing with conflicts now that are so blurry, you can't easily separate. Conventional warfare, terrorism, cyber attacks. It makes it really hard to apply those old rules.
Right, and this assassination happening in Moscow so far from any actual battlefield. It really highlights all of that, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It makes us ask, do those same rules even apply when the fighting spills over into civilian areas?
That's a question that's being debated right now by legal experts and military strategists. The traditional way of thinking about it is that there's a defined battlefield and a separation between combatants and non-combatants.
Right.
But that's just, that's not really the case anymore.
It's not so clear-cut.
No, not at all.
And we saw that in the Reddit discussions, too. There were so many different opinions about whether it was okay to target this general, even though he was accused of war crimes. But he was targeted in Moscow.
Yeah, it shows that people are really uncomfortable with how warfare is changing. We're not dealing with, clear battle lines and obvious enemies anymore. This rise of asymmetrical warfare, where weaker forces use these unconventional tactics.
Right.
It challenges everything we thought we knew.
It really does.
About what's acceptable in war.
It's like we're all trying to navigate this new world without a map.
And the stakes couldn't be higher.
Yeah, with the possibility of things escalating, the global implications, and then, all the uncertainty around what the U.S. is going to do under Trump. It feels like we're On the edge of something really dangerous.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The situation is incredibly volatile. And this assassination, it's been like a catalyst.
Right.
It's revealed the weaknesses in the global system, and it's forcing us to confront the reality of modern warfare.
So where do we go from here? If the rules aren't clear, if diplomacy is failing, and if global powers are playing these dangerous games, is there even any hope left for a peaceful resolution?
It's a tough question.
It is.
And there are no easy answers.
Yeah.
But even with all the uncertainty, one thing is clear.
What's that?
We need dialogue.
Okay.
We need critical thinking.
Yeah.
And we need to be committed to understanding everyone's perspective.
It's so easy to just get caught up in the emotions and demonize the other side.
Yeah.
But as we've seen, there are almost never simple solutions to these kinds of problems.
And that's where you come in, all of you listening. By engaging with these tough issues, by looking for information from lots of sources, and by questioning your own assumptions, you become part of the solution.
Don't shy away from the complexity. Don't settle for those easy answers.
No.
Keep asking those tough questions. Keep trying to understand, and keep the conversation going.
It's through informed and engaged citizens, like all of you, that we can hope to get through these times and work towards a more peaceful world.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us today as we explored this complex situation. Keep those minds sharp, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.